What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan podcast. I am Phillip Jordan from Last Word on College Football and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer for Dothan Wolves Football. Thank you for checking out the podcast today and making it a part of your day. Thanks to everybody who's watching on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. And if you are listening or watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, leave a comment in the video. Really appreciate that. I will mention it and talk about it on the future edition of the show. And of course, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC, and you can find a podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your audio content. This show is there. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. It's going to be a fun show for you guys today. I am going to be joined by one of the regulars here, whether this show is Talking SEC or the Phillip Jordan podcast. I am going to be joined by Coach Max Howell, longtime assistant coach. He had notable spots there at Troy, Ole Miss, and Florida State. And then 25 plus years in sports talk radio. And just recently on Friday night was inducted into the Troy Sports Hall of Fame. So when Coach Howell comes on, we are going to talk about all the big headlines from this weekend. We will live in the SEC. So the SEC will be a big portion what we talk about. We'll also talk about what that was like to be inducted into Troy Sports Hall of Fame on this past Friday night, and we'll get his thoughts on the offseason because me and Coach have not talked since the end of last season. This is the first time he's been on in a while, so I'm going to get his some quick thoughts on NIL, the expansion of the SEC, the alliance, transfer portal, all that good stuff. It's just molded into one. Some great takes by Coach Max Howell. And then on the other side of that conversation, I am going to give some picks for the weekend and some overall thoughts on week one that was college football, which I'm so glad to have college football back. It was happy times again. I had the 3 screens going. At one point, I think I had the Auburn-Akron game. Of course, I cover Auburn for Last Word College Football. Also, I had the Georgia-Clemson game on another TV, and LSU-UCLA was on another screen on my tablet. So I was all in, and that's pretty much how I am every single Saturday during the college football season. I'll do 2 screens on Sundays for the NFL TV and use an iPad or something like that, or just have the Red Zone channel going. And at the end of the show, we'll probably do some notable NFL games coming up this weekend too as well. But we're pretty much mostly about week one of college football. So before I play that conversation I had with Coach Max Howell, I'll let you guys know we did this over the phone. So there's no video of me and him talking, but I got a cool little graphic or nice little graphic. Well, I guess I'll let you decide if it's cool or nice or anything like that. But it was a straight-up phone conversation. We talked about 30 minutes, recorded conversation anyways. A lot of good stuff from Coach. So I think you will enjoy that tremendously. So here is my conversation with Coach Max Howell. Some of the great games that happened over the weekend, interesting games, is Coach Max Howell, a longtime assistant, both at Florida State and Ole Miss. Just a couple of his stops. And 25 plus years in sports talk radio. And after this weekend, a member of the Troy Sports Hall of Fame. And Coach Howell, I always appreciate it when you come on the show, whatever I'm naming the show. I always appreciate you coming on and talking college football.
Appreciate that, Phillip, so much. That was quite an honor for me this weekend down in Troy. We had the banquet and all, about 400 people showed up. And I mean, I told my kids, they all came in from South Carolina and North Carolina. I had a good crowd there. I told them, I said, you better look at me in a tuxedo now, because unless you put me one at the funeral home, I'm going to never put on another one. So it was quite entertaining, and I was just very, very humbled by the opportunity to have that opportunity to get a chance to go into the Hall of Fame there.
Yeah, it's got to be great. I had to wait a little bit longer than you thought. I know with everything going on, it's kind of been put off, but just have to be it's got to be a tremendous honor. You just knowing that everything you did on the field, for Troy, now getting honored for that, just getting, all the accolades that come along with that. That's got to just be just an awesome feeling going through that whole ceremony.
It really is, and I think what really brings you back to reality is it's there forever. I mean, it's there for to see the tape and all the things that happen to you that they bring to the forefront. And I've been to a lot of those with other people being inducted. And I'm going to tell you, Troy does as good a job as anybody in the country. I mean, it's white tablecloth, and I mean it's a nice dinner affair. Dr. Hawkins, of course, spoke, and Barry McKnight, as you know, their play-by-play guy is the voice of Troy, and he monitored the program throughout, and they keep it within about 2 hours. I've been to some that, that the inductees will get up there and they want to thank everybody they can think of, and they go on and on about that. But these are condensed down to about 4 to 5 minutes. You go in and tape it earlier, and they got the questions to ask, and you get a chance to talk. But then they can trim it any way they want to for time, and that's because how many of those things have we been to, banquets, that after a while you sit there 2 or 3 hours, this time to go home. But I think Troy does as good a job as anybody in the country there.
Yeah, I think the Pro Football Hall of Fame, this usually each guy can be up there an hour. I've seen them before.
True. That is true. I have too.
And and what's interesting, for people listening to this, especially maybe that are much younger, you were involved with Troy when they were the Red Wave, even before they were the Trojans.
See, I had a long talk with my college roommate, John Faircloth, who is also went in the Hall in 2019. He was my roommate. And here's what we came to conclusion. We both were in Troy when Troy was a teacher's college, and the coaching staff taught us how to coach. They really did. It was a great. In fact, I transferred from Auburn down there because I wanted to coach, and I knew I'd get a chance to play there, as opposed probably to playing much at Auburn. So I transferred down, and we came through that era when winning wasn't that important. It was a teaching. They had a program. We had I think maybe won 3 or 4 ball games, but that wasn't the major thing. But of course, I went out and coached 3 years at the high school level, and went back with Billy Atkins when Billy got there in 1965. And now Billy brought the effort in how to win. So I was fortunate enough to be involved in the transition over when it was a teacher's college. We learned how to teach. Then, of course, going back to Billy Atkins. And we were, in the first 3 years we were there, we won more ball games than Troy won in 20 years. It was 8, 9, 10, 11 wins, national championship, a runner-up the next year. We were there, at the time where basically put that program in the national spotlight. So I think maybe that was one of the reasons, and you're absolutely right. That John and I had a 3-hour conversation on Friday about that very thing, and I'm very appreciative.
And I'm sure you can't narrow it down to one thing, but just when you look at just your time, especially with Troy, just is there a memory or a moment or a game or anything like that just kind of sticks out to you that that you hold fondly? I mean, I'm sure there's many of them, but is there maybe just one that really sticks out over the rest?
Yeah, I think that when I got there, when I transferred down, John had already been there. John Faircloth had been there. I think they moved me in the dorm with him immediately. And I think his philosophy, he was a local guy from Brundage. He'd been off to junior college, came back, and really, in fact, he was the leader of that football team. He was very physically tough and had a really a track record of being a leader on the field. And when they teamed me up with him in the dormitory, I learned so much about life that I had not been exposed to. He came from a very rural background, and I love him like a brother today. Even that's been years and years ago, as you would guess. But I think that probably, and I've been asked that before, and I never. I'll tell you how important that was, and we'll get into the football in a minute. But when I moved to Mississippi, I don't know how this happened, but my best friend up here could be John's brother. He identical. I mean, I've just gravitated to that because those guys with those kind of personalities were so different from mine. I mean, they see life as black and white. There's no gray area. You either do it right or you don't do it. Or if you do it wrong, then, you pay the price. And they accept that. That's the way they were raised. And I learned so much about living and life on and off the football field that I think that is the thing that changed me. I know it changed my approach to every job I was offered, I had thereafter.
You talk about changes. Like I want to, me and you have not talked. We talked about this off air. We have not spoke. I want to say it was the end of the regular season, maybe after the season, but it's been a while since we've I've had you on the show and all that stuff. But college football looks different since we last spoke. NIL, Oklahoma and Texas coming to SEC, the alliance, just kind of like a grand scope of things. Just as we, obviously we had the first real week of college football this past weekend, but just kind of the whole off season and just kind of where college football and college athletics are headed. Just what are your overall thoughts on all these changes we've seen over the off season?
Philip, I think we're sitting here, we're watching a major change right before our eyes. I mean, as you said, the expansion of the SEC by bringing Texas and Oklahoma, that's one. The transfer portal that has almost destroyed recruiting at that level, because coaches now can sit back, and I think that has to be addressed, because you can't wait till the summer and transfer a kid in and put him on a starting team at another team and leave a void on another team where a coaching staff has worked, to get their team ready to play. They have to, I think, adjust that. And then, of course, the likeness, image and likeness situation. I think I was talking to somebody in Birmingham the other day, at one of the former coaches up there, and they said, that all that does, that legitimizes paying the players to play. The next step of the joke is, are they going to wear uniforms like NASCAR and Gatorade on it or whatever before it's all over? And then what do you get doing? You get a quarterback that gets a big sponsorship, say from Nike, and their shoe contracts with Adidas. How do they do that? So I mean, there's so many things like that, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm against all of that, but I'm against. I think that the upheaval of what's happening in college football from the internal part, the administration, the kids that we know all about. Bryce Young, Coach Saban said he may have $1 million worth of endorsements. I've already heard that Arch Manning, the people in Texas will guarantee him $10 million when he gets to college. I mean, all kind of rumors are out there. Well, that goes to those young kids' head, and I just see it affecting them. You put all that together. Only the strong will survive. That's all I can say. And I think I'll say this to you. We know the intensity that the University of Alabama has had with Nick Saban, because he has a plan, he has a process, and it works for him. He recruits to that, and he makes it work. We saw it at Whitney Summerfield against Miami the other night. Very few mistakes. Looked like they were ready to play for a championship. I will say this, though. He'll be 70 years old in October. The day will come with some of this stuff that's happening where he can't control that. If anything will make him retire, he just got a new contract for, I think, through 2028. I think he added 7 years to it. If he retires early before that's over, I think it'll be because he can't control everything that makes his program work. And that's, to me, a bad sign when a guy that's most successful in the league feels like he doesn't have any control over what's going on outside.
Yeah, talking about them on Saturday. I mean, okay, I'll be honest. I felt like they were going to beat Miami maybe by 14 points, and I felt like, okay, they got a lot of new guys on offense. They're going to be fine, but there's going to be some figuring some stuff out. The defense will carry it away. But was I wrong? They just picked up where they left off last year with Matt Jones and that crew. And it's just, what stuck out you the most seeing Alabama beat Miami that way? Because I don't feel like Miami at the end of the year we're going to look at them as a bad team. I feel like they'll be a solid team. I mean, I felt like I said Alabama would win that game and win it handily to a degree. But I mean, I was just surprised, how they just picked up where they left off last year. But just for you, what was your big takeaway from Alabama's win over Miami on Saturday?
I'll tell you, Philip, it's all about coaching. If you watch Alabama and anybody, I'm not saying they're going to win them all every year. We know that, because that emotional thing sometimes plays a role in it. When the kids, you can't quite get them up to stay up. We know that. But if you analyze that team every year, wherever they play, the thing is they've got so much talent that they can substitute kids in and out, and they don't miss a beat. Most schools can't do that. And I've said for years that most schools have 20 at that level, have 20, 25 players that can play. Alabama have 40 that can play. That right there is. I saw them in the spring. I had no doubt that Bryce Young would be the best quarterback. All this stuff about J.T. Daniels and all that stuff. Now, I like Corral at Ole Miss. We'll talk a little bit about him later. But I knew J.T. Daniels was not, when you put them side by side. And remember, Georgia didn't score a touchdown. That 10-3 ball game was a pick that scored from the defensive side, not the offense. Again, we'll explore that a little bit better. But Alabama they are so proficient and they're so well coached and they don't make mistakes. And I don't know how many more accolades we can give them, but they're nothing short of an NFL team practically. I mean, they don't have the big old kids again, but the kids they've got are so talented versus what they play against. It's it's going to be an Alabama win unless just some mistake happens that they didn't quite prepare for. That's all I know how to say it.
Yeah, and for me too, watching them play, look, the receivers they've lost over the last 2 years. I mean, all four of them are in the NFL or are going to be starters in the NFL, or if they're not starting. And then you look, okay, you knew John Minchie was there. You could expect him to step into that role. But then you get the Jameson Williams transfer from Ohio State. I mean, how good is Ohio State's receivers if they're letting him walk out the door to go to Alabama? Because he put on a big show of Saturday. He had 4 receptions, 126 yards, and 1 touchdown. So it's like they keep doing this with the quarterbacks, but the recruiting and coaching with the receivers is tremendous.
Right. I mean, that's not by accident. That's all planned. You look at the number of kids in a recruiting class. Alabama's going to be heavy in wide receiver and defensive backs, and they're going to fill that in with offensive and defensive linemen. I mean, that's Coach Saban's got that system down. He knows what he needs. They evaluate it. Here's another thing that Alabama has that no other school I know it has it to this degree. He's got 25 guys that sit in the room all day, every day. And don't see there, NCAA doesn't make any distinction of coaches off the just as those that could be on the field. They can have 10 coaches on the field, and that's it. But the off-field stuff, when he brought Butch Davis back, I can just go down the list of the Sarkisian the first year before he put him on the field. They put him in a classroom, take great film. Look at high school kids coming up. They have to report to Coach Saban every morning, and he'll tell them exactly what where they are, what they need to do. And nobody else does it to that degree. And I think that there lies that finite game planning that he's doing almost daily. And that, Philip, in all fairness, that's year round. He didn't have a hobby. I mean, he's got a boat and a house over in Georgia on the lake, but he probably takes his camera. I mean, his projector over there and looks at his tape while he's eating out on the deck or something.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, you say it all the time. It's just amazing what he's able to do. And, and just while we're kind of on them, and maybe not, we'll wait to talk about Georgia a second, but just in the West. I mean, I know everybody thinks, a lot of people think Texas A&M could maybe give them a run. I'm skeptical about that. I want to see it at A&M before I believe it. You have a new quarterback and you have new offensive linemen, and I think they struggled a little bit with Kent State in the first half on Saturday. We saw what happened with LSU, and I think I like Brian Harsin, but Auburn's a ways off. Ole Miss, we'll see. But with A&M especially, do you see them as potentially being a threat? I mean, anybody in the West can knock them off?
Here's what I always say. I've done my homework on Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher has brought him back. I don't think there's any doubt about it. He's done. They pay him well, and he's recruited well, and all this. But if you look at the history of Texas A&M, this is when Coach Bryant was there, when Gene Stallings was there. We just go down the list. The last time they won a national championship, 1938. Now think about that. And this is when Texas was down, and they could control the state in recruits in the state of Texas. That's big, but they couldn't get enough. They couldn't do it. Until Jimbo does better. They were 9-1 last year on a shortened season. I got him penciled in as a 10-2 coach, just like Kirby Smart. There'll be something that'll happen along the way in a ball game that he won't quite be prepared for, or he quite won't have the talent to match up. To answer your question, I'm giving you reasons why I don't think they can. I'm not saying ever beat him, but Coach Saban is 23-0 against his assistant coaches. And I think at the end of the year he'll be about 28 or 29-0. I just don't see anybody beating him.
You talk about Kirby, one of the other assistants out, from under Nick Saban, and to get that 10-3 win over Clemson. Not an offensive showcase by any means. They did get to the quarterback 7 times. Did Georgia?
Yep.
But it was 10-3, and it was a defensive game. But there's a lot of times in these games when Georgia has played teams that are equal talent. Like you just said, Kirby gets put in situations where he doesn't know what to do, and Georgia ends up losing. They did win that one against Clemson. Just the win in itself, I mean, in your opinion, how big of a win just was that for the Georgia program and Kirby Smart, moving forward?
Well, let me break down how they won it. They won it because the quarterback at Clemson can't play at that level. Look at him. I mean, he's 6'4" or 5. He's 250 pounds, and his feet slower than mine. Why they blitzed him? He got seven sacks because they couldn't escape. The tape had already shown that. I don't know how they're going to correct that. The kid was a big kid in high school, came out of California with a bunch of accolades. But when you're 6'5" and 250 playing quarterback in high school, you're going to look like a superstar. When you get to the next level, though, everybody's got guys like that. I mean, we saw one in Florida. Against Florida, the Anthony Richardson kid, he touched the ball 7 times for us for 160 yards. But Clemson, the reason they blitzed the kid and the reason they got to him is because they knew he couldn't escape. And I don't know. Now, I say all that to you when they play a good team like Georgia that has a good defense. But they're going to be better than everybody else. You know what? I'd not be surprised if Miami didn't beat them. Miami's got as much talent right now, particularly with their quarterback. And they'll get him outside and run him. And then we'll really see how good Clemson's defense is. Their front four is good. I don't take that away from them. But their offense, it's a lot to be desired right now. I mean, they have less than 10 yards rushing or something like that. It was awful.
2 yards.
Yeah, 2. Okay. See, so that tells you right there that they got problems internally on the offensive side. So I say all that to you to say, the way they play, they'll never be in the playoff. I would be surprised. They'd probably be down. They would end up being 9-3, maybe 10-2. But they play in the ACC. They won't have a lot of competition till they get to the playoff. I thought at one time before the season, North Carolina might be the team. Well, they get beat too. So that's another one that plays good some weekends, but they don't play consistently.
Yeah, it was not a good weekend for the ACC at all.
You're right, it wasn't.
And that didn't help Clemson's cause, because then you can say, okay, well, you lose to Georgia, however it is, but North Carolina meet them in an ACC championship game. Miami's there. You got other teams in that conference, but I don't think there's a team ranked in the conference outside of Clemson now. So and at least last year you had Notre Dame sitting there. You had that could pump up your resume, but it's going to be tough for them, because at the end of the year, if they have a loss and maybe Georgia runs through and just loses to Alabama, I mean, Georgia's got them with the head-to-head, and then you look at what conference you were in versus them versus the SEC. I mean, it's Clemson going to have to go. Clemson can't lose a game, obviously, and then they're probably going to need help at the end of the year if they want to try to have any shot at the playoff. Yeah,
well, I think you're absolutely right, and I do think that that Georgia will go all the way until they play Alabama. I don't think they're good enough to beat Alabama. So does that knock them out? And how good is Ohio State? And how good is Oklahoma? Oklahoma struggles with Tulane when they 40-35. That was a struggle all with the whole ball game. Ohio State wins, but they gave up 31 or 2 gave it up on the defensive side of the ball. So if you look at it across the board, just from a general perspective, you don't have to be a fan, but just look at across the board on how Alabama played versus everybody else that you saw. Did you see anybody else that played at that level, in that proficiency?
Mm-mm.
I just don't think so. I don't think there's anybody. Here, Philip, here's the good thing for them. This is the first ball game.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that they're going to get better usually between that second, third ball game. Alabama's got a good test the third week against Florida. I think I've said forever they'll use this week for Mercer, and next week they'll use 2 weeks to get ready for Florida because they want to go into Gainesville, and make a statement. So I think they will. It'll be 2:30 national televised game, and because they want that exposure nationally. And Florida's got some good athletes, but they don't have enough. Not right now. And I like Dan. Don't get me wrong. I like Dan Mullen. I think he's as good a quarterback coach as it is in the league. But Avery Jones might better enjoy these next 2 or 3 weeks starting, because after the Alabama game, he may lose that job to Anthony Richardson, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I agree with you. When you look at Alabama, the way they played, after week 1, they played obviously the best, and they look head and shoulders, after 1 week, the best team, because everybody else that's up there is flawed. Alabama, maybe throughout the year, maybe they could find a little, but there's really nothing big and glaring with this team. Their defense is going to be good all year. Now, obviously, the offense is picking up where last year's team left off. I like Ohio State's offense, but defensively, I worry, how many points they're going to give up. Their only shot against Alabama is to hope it's a back and forth game like Florida got with them last year. And with Oklahoma, Spencer Rattler is one of them guys. And look, I came to season high on Oklahoma, but he's one of them guys. He can be kind of hot and cold. When he's on, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, but he can throw some bad interceptions. And watch Georgia offensively. Clemson's the same way. There's other teams like that. But so right now, like I said, after 1 week, Alabama right now looks like head and shoulders the best team in the country.
I don't think there's any doubt in the other teams out there. The next one to me that plays close to that level, but doesn't have the overall talent, Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. I look for Cincinnati probably go undefeated, but they got a good football team. But see, when you go and watch them and put them, you might just put them against Alabama. They can't beat Alabama. Mm-hmm. They don't have enough players. The other team has got 20, 25. They'll do well, but they don't have 40. Alabama loses an inside linebacker, and the Alley kid, he's out for the year. They won't miss a beat. They just plug somebody else in. It moves. That's the mark of a very competent and confident coaching staff and football team when you can, when you have built it to that level. And Nick Saban's done that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple more teams I want to hit on real quick. I know we've done hit the over 20-minute mark here in our conversation. LSU, and I felt coming into the season, I wasn't thinking this team was a contender for the West, but I was thinking maybe they could finish third, go 9-3, and maybe set themselves up with some momentum for 2022.
That's about where I was too. Yeah,
and then, but UCLA happened, and especially defensively. You give up over 200 yards rushing, and they only run the ball for 49. And you see the comments now is Ed Orgeron a one-hit wonder? He could only win with Joe Burrow. Is he Gene Chizik 2.0? And so on and so forth. Where do you see LSU now after that loss to UCLA, and where this program's headed?
See, in fact, I did a show the other day, and the first thing I came on, I said I need to make 2 apologies. One is I thought Clemson was better than they were, and obviously they got quarterback problems. And the other one was I thought LSU was better because I felt the same as you did. The thing that disappointed me with the LSU team is they didn't play physically. I thought because of being in the SEC and the weather was different out here. Look, I've been on taking teams across the country, particularly at Florida State. We played out the way we played in Arizona and all that. And I know that's a hard thing to move a team early in the season out there, but the fact is they didn't show up to play. They looked confused. It's almost like they hadn't been coaching. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt to start with. Is the fact is that they had to go to Houston to practice because of the hurricane. Then they went to Dallas, and they came back, and they flew out there. That was kind of a mixed up week on the schedule and all. But Philip, that doesn't take away. That should not take away from how physical your team can be. And LSU was not that. And I've already looked at their schedule. When they go to Oxford, I'm going to say that's going to be an embarrassing beating that they're going to take as well. Because Ole Miss's offense is better than UCLA. Look, UCLA had won 4 games in 3 years or something. They had been in the ball game with anybody, and LSU just didn't go to play. And I'll throw this in just far as Coach Ogeron is concerned. You can have off-field problems that they've got down there right now. If you win it on the field, and it may not cost you your job, you might can survive it. But if you losing and have those kind of problems, there's going to be some folks after you to try to get rid of you. And I think that's starting to brew down there right now.
It seems like it's going that way. And it's someone that's, that's coached, been on staffs before, and I want to get your thoughts on this. And for me, and I felt the same way when Auburn, over 10 years ago when they fired Gene Chizik. I believe it's if you do fire him, I mean, if it's 6-6 or it just gets really, really bad, I get it. But if it's 8-4, something like that, you fire him 2 years after a national championship. Yep. Doesn't that probably make it hard to go get a big name coach, because then he could say, hey, I could win a championship there, but 2 years later they may fire me?
Yeah. Well, I think the money's gotten so big that philosophy certainly will come into play. But those coaches, their agents that make those contracts, they get look. Gus Malzahn walked away with $21 million in cash. They didn't pay him. They aren't paying him off by the month. They wrote 2 checks. I happen to know the 2 guys that wrote the checks. And so he goes to Central Florida and just has a good time. I mean, I hate to say that that's the bottom line, but that's the way it's gone. It's a corporate business now. Those guys are corporate CEOs, and if when things don't go well, their kids, their grandkids are set for life. And then it's the joke is around town, if you do that, and then you look for a job, Coach Saban will hire you and rehab you, and then put you back in the marketplace. So it's a whole different world out there. But if that does happen, that will be a concern for some coaches. But I can guarantee you there'll be 20 coaches line up to try to get that job at LSU if something happens to get Ogeron.
And the last thing I'll talk to you about, you mentioned Ole Miss there, and very impressive on Monday night what they did, because, I mean, the way their offense looked without their play caller, Lane Kiffin,
right,
being there. And what they did to Louisville, it only makes me think what they would have done to him if Lane Kiffin had been on the sideline calling plays. I was surprised he was not very active on Twitter last night during the game. I just figured it was going to be, but he wasn't. I kept looking. He wasn't. But overall, I mean, that offense was humming last night. And I feel like Matt Corral, as long as he does not throw the interceptions, like he had the tendency to do in a couple of games last year, it should be fine. And if they're just better defensively, I mean, they are going to be a dangerous team. Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. They flew around the ball. They didn't play quite physical enough, I think, for SEC teams. But Louisville's not an SEC team. Their kids got good speed and all, but they aren't very big. They did look very strong to me. But Ole Miss stayed that 3-man front all night. The linebackers were playing 5 or 6 yard deep, and they did some blitzing out of that. But they had to get a running start to do so. Against a good physical team, they're going to have to bring those linebackers up and play physical. I like number 44, the transfer from Maryland. I thought he was on the defensive side. I think that's kind of the spark they needed. That's the kind of kid they need. I mean, that kid's 6'4", 240, 245, and can run. And if you notice, they play him to the outside, play him on the wide side of the field. And that's mainly because of the speed. He can string it out if they try to run a sweep on that side. He drop, cover a back out the backfield. So I think they've got the right plan, but they got to recruit. Philip, I got to recruit to that defensive side. And they started. I mean, I've read all the facts on it. They brought in 8 kids, some out of the portal, some on junior college, and a couple of high school kids, all on the defensive side. And, I think they're headed in the right direction. But right now, they're going to find this year against, I don't think they beat Alabama, but against LSU and A&M, they're going to score a lot of points. I don't know whether they can win or not. But if LSU and A&M doesn't bring their A game, they'll do just like they did. Look, they scored 48 on Alabama last year. Mm-hmm. Alabama won, I think, 53-48 in that ball game. So they're poised to have really a good year. I got them on my early schedule. I got them winning 9 ball games, and I think they can unless they get somebody hurt. Here's the worst part: if Corral goes down, it's over. I mean, Plumlee will have to go back. Play quarterback probably. Now they got a big, tall kid. They played a freshman. They played a little bit last night. But if Corral goes down, I'll look for Plumlee to go back and then go back to an option type offense.
And the last thing I ask you is we've hit over 30 minutes now here on our conversation. It's always great having you on. Just overall, is there anything else that really stood out to you in the first week of college football that we haven't discussed?
Well, I think that's really a good question because I've watched all the stuff and we opened up the conversation by changing. I'm going to be anxious to watch how these different teams and these players, you don't hear much about the likeness and image and the money these kids are getting. And occasionally you see something leap out, but how are they going to handle that? These kids going to have an agent. They're going to have to pay income tax off that money. How's that going to affect their performance on the field? Early in the season, I don't think it's going to make a difference. But we get on into mid-season, late season, and a team that's struggling, and the quarterback's got $100,000 coming in, and the offensive guard's got $1 because all he's got is a milkshake coming somewhere. Does that make a difference in their performance? Those are things I'm going to watch. I'm going to be really in tune to because I said before, I'm not against change, but I'm against if change comes without really any controls over it. I don't see the NCAA able to step up and do anything with this right now.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season with all that, with everything else, hanging over with all the other stuff. And, of course, the big bad SEC, everybody upset with them, what they did the all season and everything else. And can everybody knock off Alabama? So it's going to be a fun season. And, Coach, I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure we'll have a few conversations throughout the season, but I do appreciate you taking the time and coming on the show this week.
Philip, it's always my pleasure to do so. And you call any time, I'll be happy to jump on with you. Be glad to.
All right. Thanks again to Coach Max Howell for being on this edition of the Philip Jordan podcast. And look forward. I'll have Coach on a couple more times throughout the year, getting him break down what everything's going on in the SEC and college football and get his thoughts. He always does a great job and always enjoy when he comes on the show. So real quick, we're going to get out of here. Going to look at some games coming up this weekend. First up in the SEC, you got Pitt at Tennessee. Pitt's a 3.5-point favorite here, just 11 o'clock kickoff. Josh Heupel won his first game there against Bowling Green. A lot of running yards. Had two running backs over 100 yards there. We'll see. I like Pitt in this game. I think Pitt's going to win this one. Some other games going on. A&M will be at Colorado. Texas A&M. Look, that A&M should win that game. It's a team they're better than on paper, but it will be interesting seeing them go out on the road. You'll have Texas at Arkansas, which will be an SEC matchup in the coming years whenever Texas and Oklahoma officially do come to the conference. NC State will be playing at Mississippi State. Mississippi State had to come back. They were down 34-14. 21 unanswered there in the fourth quarter to win that game. So it's the Mike Leach effect still on there. Missouri at Kentucky. We'll see. This is a big game here in the SEC, and a game I don't think a lot of people are going to be talking about. But these are two teams that I think could be battling out for the number 2 spot in the East, but most definitely the 3 spot. I do believe who wins this one will get that 3 spot. And we'll leave us for Kentucky threw for over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns last week. And if I've been saying this, and it was against Louisiana Monroe, but if Kentucky can get a consistent passing game along with what they can do with Christopher Rodriguez and that offensive line and that defense that Stoops has there at Kentucky, that team will be dangerous and could very well challenge Florida for the 2 spot. I do not think they could challenge Georgia for number 1, but definitely that number 2 spot there. Some other interesting games. You got Liberty at Troy. Troy won 55-3 over Southern this weekend. See how they do going against that Hugh Freeze offense with Malik Willis. Their quarterback, of course, Malik Willis is being looked at by some as a potential big-time prospect when it comes to the NFL draft this upcoming next year. And also having Hugh Freeze keeps winning, will a Power 5 team come a-calling and try to get Hugh Freeze to be their head coach. Appalachian State will be at Miami. Now, Miami is a 9-point favorite here. Miami should win. They're the better team on paper, but I would not be surprised if Appalachian State was able to pull off the win here. You have Oregon playing Ohio State. I watched a little bit of the Oregon-Fresno State game. Fresno State was able to put up yards through the air, and they could not get any pass rush. Could Oregon in that game? I think Ohio State's going to put a lot of points up in this game. I do not think Oregon wins. Ohio State is, they are a 14-point favorite in this one. I am going to go with Ohio State big here. They're going to win. I think Ohio State's second best team in the country, in my opinion, right now. Iowa, number 10. At number 9, Iowa State. Iowa dominated Indiana this past week. Iowa State struggled with Northern Iowa. Now, Iowa State, they are a slim favorite here at 4.5. They are the home team. I'm picking Iowa. I thought Iowa State would be a challenger to Oklahoma in the Big 12, and they may still be, but I just don't like what we saw after last week. I know they have all the starters back, Brock Purdy at quarterback, but I'm going to go with Iowa winning that. And, of course, we got some NFL coming up this week. Real quick of some of the big games. I'm not going to go to the whole schedule, but some big games you'll be seeing this week. Because on Thursday night, you'll have the Cowboys and the Buccaneers kicking things off. Tampa Bay trying to defend the title. Tom Brady there, another season for the greatest of all time. The Steelers at the Bills. I don't think the Steelers are going to be a playoff team this year, but I think Buffalo, they are a direct challenger to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC. You'll have the Browns at the Chiefs. Now, the Browns came very close to beating the Chiefs in the playoffs last year, and I know Mahomes had to leave that game, but still, the Browns were very, very close to knocking them off. That should be a very fun game. Browns, great offensive line with Chubb and Kareem Hunt at running back and Baker Mayfield. Awesome offensive weapons there. What would it be defensively? That's going to be a fun game, and that could be a preview for later down the line in the AFC Championship game. Packers will be at the Saints. Of course, the Drew Brees era is on now there in New Orleans. And the Packers, Aaron Rodgers is back. They are trying to get back to, once again, the NFC Championship game and get over that hump and get to the Super Bowl this year. The Bears at the Rams. I like the Rams. I think the Rams are a legit Super Bowl contender now with Matthew Stafford quarterback. The Bears, it's only a matter of time, in my opinion, when Justin Fields will take over at quarterback there. And then on Monday night, you got the Ravens at the Raiders. Derek Carr, how long is the deal there with him and Gruden going to last? And with the Ravens, once again, trying to make another run with Lamar Jackson. And can they continue that? And I'm always looking at Lamar Jackson. What will he be as a passer? Will any of that improve? He's never going to be one of the top pure passing quarterbacks in the league. But can he add enough of his passing game to make him a lot more dangerous for the one-time MVP? All right, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of the Philip Jordan Podcast. Thank you for checking out the show, whether you're watching it on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, or if you're listening over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please, if you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. And if you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. Remember, you can always email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. I'll be back next week. Talk more great college football stuff. We'll break down week 2 with somebody. Don't have that booked yet, but we'll be breaking it down with somebody. And I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Enjoy the football this weekend. Until next time, bye-bye.